bear cub was marooned on a melting ice floe in a storm. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. In the remote village of White Ridge, where snow-covered mountains touch the sky and the frozen bay stretched into the horizon, a tiny cabin stood apart from the others. Inside, little Nora Reed gazed through a frost-covered window, her tiny fingers pressing against the cold glass. Outside, the storm had begun, sending swirls of white across the darkening sky. At just 10 months old, Nora couldn't understand the words of the adults, but she felt the worry in their voices as they prepared for what the radio called the worst blizzard in 50 years. Nora's mother, Sophia Reed, wrapped another blanket around her daughter's shoulders. "We'll be fine, little one," she whispered, though her eyes kept darting to the window. Sophia's husband, Marcus, was still out checking on their elderly neighbors, and the howling wind made her stomach twist with worry. Far beyond the village's edge, where the frozen bay began to break apart under the storm's fury, a small polar bear cub cried out. Separated from his mother during their hunt, the cub now found himself stranded on a chunk of ice no bigger than a small boat. The ice drifted further from shore with each passing minute, carried by waves that grew taller as the storm intensified. The cub, whom the village children had nicknamed Frost for his unusually white coat, pawed desperately at the edges of his shrinking island. His frightened cries were lost in the wind's roar. The mother bear, massive and powerful, paced the shoreline, her roars of distress carrying across the frozen wasteland. But the gap between them grew wider, and the ice beneath Frost grew thinner. At the edge of the village, a group of children had gathered despite their parents' warnings. They stood on a small hill overlooking the bay, pointing and laughing at the stranded cub. "Look at him slip," called out Tyler Wilson, the oldest boy at 12. "Bet he falls in before the storm really hits." "My dad says bears can swim," said 8-year-old Lily Parker, though uncertainty tinged her voice. "He'll be okay, right?" Tyler snorted. "Not in this water, too cold, and look how small he is." He bent down, packing snow between his mittened hands. "Watch this," he said, hurling a snowball toward the drifting ice floe. It fell short, but the cub flinched anyway, nearly slipping into the churning water. Back in the cabin, Nora's eyes remained fixed on the window. Something beyond the swirling snow had caught her attention, something she couldn't possibly see from this distance, and yet somehow she felt it: fear, cold, and desperate loneliness. The baby's face scrunched up, her usual happy babbling replaced by whimpers that grew louder with each passing moment. Sophia busied herself with the fireplace, trying to coax more heat from the dwindling logs. "Marcus should have been back by now," she murmured, glancing at the old clock on the wall. Outside, the wind screamed louder, battering the small cabin with icy fury. On the ice floe, Frost huddled into a tight ball, his wet fur providing little protection from the biting cold. The chunk of ice had shrunk by half in the last hour, its edges dissolving into the dark water. The mother bear's roars had faded. Either she had given up, or the storm had swallowed her cries. Either way, Frost was alone now, a tiny speck of life against the vast, uncaring wilderness. The village children had grown bolder. They'd ventured closer to the shore, their snowballs now occasionally hitting the ice floe, sending chips of it crumbling into the water. "Stop it!" Lily shouted suddenly, grabbing Tyler's arm as he prepared another throw. "You're making it worse." "It's just a bear," Tyler shot back, shaking her off. "Bears eat people, you know. My uncle got attacked by one last year." "He's just a baby," Lily insisted, tears forming in her eyes. "He's scared." Tyler's response was cut short by a new sound, a deep, rumbling growl that somehow carried over the storm's chaos. The mother bear had circled around, appearing now just yards from the children, her massive form almost ghostly in the swirling snow. Her black eyes fixed on them, filled with a fury that transcended species. The children froze, terror replacing their earlier bravado. The mother bear rose to her full height, towering over them like a mountain of muscle and rage. One swipe of her paw could end any of them. She took a step forward, snow crunching beneath her massive weight. Inside the cabin, something changed in Nora. Her whimpers became determined grunts as she pushed herself away from the window, crawling with unexpected speed toward the door. Sophia, still tending the fire, didn't notice until she heard the distinct creak of the door opening, a door she was certain she had latched. "Nora!" she cried, turning to see her baby disappearing into the swirling white. "Nora!" The storm swallowed her screams as she lunged for the door, her heart pounding with a terror unlike anything she had ever known. Outside, in the blind fury of the blizzard, something impossible was happening, something that would change White Ridge forever. The wind hit Nora like a wall of ice, but the baby pressed forward on hands and knees, her tiny body moving with purpose no infant should possess. Snow clung to her pajamas, turning them stiff with frost. Her mother's screams behind her went unheard as the storm swallowed everything: sound, sight, even thought. Meanwhile, the mother bear had cornered the village children against a snowdrift. Tyler had fallen backward, his earlier confidence replaced by raw terror. Lily stood frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. The other children whimpered, pressing together like frightened sheep. The bear's muscles tensed, ready to strike, when something caught her attention. Through the storm's chaos, a small figure emerged, crawling, not walking. The bear's nose twitched, catching a scent that made no sense. A human cub, alone in the blizzard, moving not away from danger but toward it. On the ice floe, Frost lifted his head. The chunk of ice had shrunk to barely the size of a dinner table, waves lapping over its edges. His paws slipped on the wet surface as he struggled to stay centered. But then he saw something that made him forget his fear, if only for a moment. A tiny human, smaller than any he'd ever glimpsed from afar, was crawling through the snow toward the water's edge. The baby's approach created a strange ripple effect. The mother bear, distracted by this impossible sight, turned away from the children. They seized their chance, scrambling back toward the village, Tyler pulling Lily along as she stumbled through the deep snow. Sophia burst from the cabin, her bare feet sinking into the snow. She could barely see 3 feet ahead, but maternal instinct drove her forward. "Nora!" she screamed again, the wind stealing her voice. Behind her, she heard the cabin door slam shut. Marcus had returned. "Sophia, what's happening?" His voice was barely audible over the storm. "The baby. She's out here." She opened the door somehow and... Marcus didn't wait for her to finish. He grabbed his heavy coat and a flashlight, though its beam was nearly useless in the whiteout conditions. Together, they plunged into the storm. Nora had reached the shore now. The icy water lapped at her tiny hands, but she didn't pull back. Instead, she made sounds. Not the typical babbling of an infant, but something else. It was almost like singing, a wordless melody that somehow carried over the wind's howl. On the ice floe, Frost heard it. The sound reached into something primal within him, something that transcended species. He stopped his panicked movements, his small black eyes fixed on the baby. The ice beneath him groaned, a spiderweb of cracks spreading across its surface. The mother bear had followed the baby to the water's edge. She stood just yards away, her massive form casting a shadow even in the storm's dim light. Every instinct told her to charge, to protect her cub from this human threat. But something held her back. The baby wasn't acting like any human she'd encountered. There was no fear in her movements, no aggression. Just that strange, haunting melody. Back at the village, the children had reached their homes, breathless and terrified. Tyler burst through his front door, snow cascading from his clothes. "Dad, there's a bear and the Reed baby. She's out in the storm." His father, Robert Wilson, jumped to his feet. "What? How is Nora outside?" "I don't know. She just appeared, crawling through the snow. And the bear, the mother bear, she almost killed us." Robert grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace. "Stay here," he ordered, already heading for the door. Word spread quickly through the small village. Despite the storm, men and women emerged from their homes, armed with flashlights, ropes, and weapons. The village had a protocol for bear encounters, but a baby in the mix. That changed everything. On the shore, a strange tableau had formed. The baby sat at the water's edge, still making those haunting sounds. The mother bear stood motionless nearby, her eyes moving between the infant and her stranded cub. And on the rapidly shrinking ice floe, Frost had moved to the edge closest to shore, his cries now matching the rhythm of Nora's strange song. Sophia and Marcus stumbled through the snow, following the faint sound of their daughter's voice. When they finally caught sight of her, their hearts nearly stopped. There was their baby, sitting in the snow just feet from the dark water, and behind her loomed the massive form of a polar bear. "Don't move," Marcus whispered, his hand automatically reaching for a weapon he didn't have. "That's our daughter," Sophia hissed back. Every fiber of her being screamed to run forward, to snatch Nora away from danger. "Sophia, wait, look at the bear. It's not attacking." Indeed, the mother bear seemed almost confused. Her head swayed slightly, as if she was listening to Nora's wordless song. On the ice floe, her cub had begun making similar sounds, a high-pitched keening that harmonized with the baby's melody. The ice floe lurched suddenly, a large chunk breaking away. Frost scrambled to maintain his balance, but his hind legs slipped into the freezing water. His cries became desperate, the melody forgotten in his panic. Without warning, Nora began crawling forward again, not toward safety, but toward the water. The mother bear rumbled, a sound that was neither threatening nor welcoming, just watchful. "No, no, no," Sophia moaned, fighting Marcus's restraining grip. "She'll drown." But Nora stopped at the very edge, where the waves lapped at the frozen shore. She reached out with one tiny hand, not toward the water, but toward something no one else could see. Her other hand stretched back toward the mother bear, as if trying to connect two invisible points. The villagers had begun to arrive, Robert Wilson in the lead with his rifle raised. He stopped short at the scene before him, his weapon wavering. "Nobody shoot," someone whispered. It might have been Lily's mother, Eleanor Parker. "Just wait." On the ice floe, Frost made one last desperate attempt to leap toward shore. But the distance was too great, his strength too depleted. He hit the water with a small splash, his thick fur immediately waterlogged, dragging him down. The mother bear roared, a sound of pure anguish that cut through the storm. She took a step toward the water, then stopped, looking at her cub, then at the human baby, torn between instinct and something else, something new and confusing. That's when Nora did something that defied every law of nature and human development. The 10-month-old baby, who could barely stand with support, pushed herself to her feet. She swayed in the wind but remained upright, her arms spread wide as if embracing the storm itself. The villagers gasped collectively. Sophia fell to her knees in the snow, Marcus's arms the only thing keeping her from collapsing entirely. Nora's song changed. It became louder, more urgent, and then, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, something extraordinary happened. The water around the drowning cub began to move differently, not with the chaotic motion of storm-driven waves, but with purpose, with intent. A current formed, impossibly strong and precisely directed. It caught Frost just as his small head disappeared beneath the surface, pushing him not out to sea but back toward the shore. The ice floe, which should have continued drifting away, suddenly reversed direction, grinding against the frozen shoreline with a sound like breaking glass. The mother bear stood perfectly still, her ancient eyes reflecting something that might have been awe. The armed villagers lowered their weapons, unanimous in their bewilderment, and in the center of it all, a baby stood with arms outstretched, conducting an orchestra of wind and water that no human should be able to command. Frost's body washed up on the shore, waterlogged and still. The mother bear moved then, but slowly, carefully, approaching her cub with none of her earlier aggression. She sniffed at his motionless form, then did something that bears rarely do. She looked directly at the human baby and made a sound that was almost like a question. Nora lowered her arms and sank back into the snow, once again just an infant. But her eyes, those bright, knowing eyes, remained fixed on the mother bear. She crawled forward, not quickly, but with the same deliberate purpose that had carried her into the storm. The villagers held their breath. Sophia made another attempt to go to her daughter, but Eleanor Parker caught her arm. "Wait," the older woman whispered. I think we need to see this." Nora reached the cub's still form. The mother bear stood over them both, a mountain of white fur and barely contained power. The baby placed one tiny hand on Frost's wet fur, and the other reached up, impossibly high, toward the mother bear's lowered head. For a moment that stretched like hours, nothing moved except the storm. Then Nora made a new sound. Not a song this time, but something like laughter, bright and pure and utterly out of place in that frozen tableau of life and death. And beneath her hand, Frost stirred. The cub coughed, water spurting from his mouth and nose. His eyes opened, unfocused at first, then slowly clearing. He was weak, hypothermic, but alive. Impossibly, miraculously alive. The mother bear made a sound that in any other creature might have been called a sob. She lowered her massive head until it was inches from her cub, her breath warming his sodden fur. Her eyes moved to Nora, and in them was something no human had ever seen in a wild bear's gaze. Gratitude, perhaps, or recognition of something beyond the boundaries of species and instinct. Marcus finally broke free from his own paralysis. He moved forward slowly, hands visible and empty, speaking in the soft tones one might use with a frightened animal. "It's okay," he said, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the bear, his daughter, or himself. "We're just going to take our baby now. Nobody's going to hurt anyone." The mother bear watched him approach, but made no aggressive moves. When Marcus was close enough, he scooped Nora into his arms, the baby giggling as if she'd just finished playing a particularly fun game. As he backed away, cradling his daughter, the mother bear turned her attention fully to her cub, licking his fur and nudging him with her nose. The villagers remained frozen in place, weapons lowered, as they witnessed something that would become legend in White Ridge. Slowly, carefully, the mother bear helped her cub to his feet. Frost was shaky but managed to stand, leaning heavily against his mother's solid bulk. Together, the two bears began moving away from the shore, away from the humans. But before they disappeared into the storm, the mother turned back one last time. Her gaze found Nora, secure in her father's arms, and she did something bears don't do. She nodded, just once, a gesture so human it sent chills through every witness. Then they were gone, swallowed by the blizzard, leaving only tracks in the snow and a story that no one quite believed, even as they lived it. Sophia had reached Marcus and Nora by then, wrapping them both in a desperate embrace. Nora's skin was cold to the touch, her pajamas soaked with snow, but she showed no signs of distress. If anything, she seemed energized, her usual baby babble replaced by sounds that almost resembled the strange melody she'd sung to the bears. "We need to get her inside," Robert Wilson said, lowering his rifle completely. "Get her warm. Call the doctor." "I'm taking her to the clinic," Marcus said firmly. "I don't care if the roads are closed. We'll walk if we have to." "I'll drive you," Robert offered immediately. "My truck can handle the storm." As the group began moving back toward the village, Lily Parker tugged on her mother's coat. "Mom, did you see what she did? The baby? She saved the bear cub. She made the water bring him back." Eleanor smoothed her daughter's hair, her own voice shaky. "I don't know what I saw, sweetheart. I honestly don't know." Tyler Wilson had been uncharacteristically quiet, but now he spoke up. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice small. "I shouldn't have thrown those snowballs. I could have. I almost—" His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll talk about it later, son. Right now, let's just be grateful everyone's okay." But as they trudged through the snow, each person carried their own version of what they'd witnessed. Some would convince themselves it was a trick of the storm, that the tide and wind had coincidentally saved the cub. Others would speak in hushed tones of miracles and mysteries beyond human understanding. Old Samuel Cooper, the village's unofficial historian and keeper of Inuit legends, walked more slowly than the rest. His weathered face bore an expression of recognition rather than surprise. "What is it, Sam?" asked Martha Hayes, the village teacher. "You look like you've seen this before." Samuel's voice was thoughtful. "Not seen exactly, but heard. The elders used to tell stories. They said that sometimes, when the world is out of balance, the spirits send messengers, bridges between the human world and the wild. They called them the Sela Talkers, those who speak to the storm." Martha shivered, and not from the cold. "You don't really believe that, do you? After what we just saw?" Samuel's eyes followed the Reed family as they climbed into Robert's truck. "I'm not sure what I believe anymore, but that baby, she knew exactly what she was doing out there, and that bear knew it too." The truck's engine roared to life, its headlights cutting through the swirling snow. As it pulled away, carrying Nora to the medical center, the storm began to lessen. Not all at once, but noticeably, as if the worst of its fury had served its purpose and could now subside. Back on the shore, where minutes ago a drama of life and death had played out, only the wind remained. The broken pieces of ice floe had already drifted away, and the bear's tracks were quickly filling with fresh snow. Soon, there would be no physical evidence of what had occurred, only the memories of those who witnessed it, and the questions that would haunt them for years to come. In the truck, wrapped in blankets in her father's arms, Nora had fallen asleep. Her breathing was steady, her color good despite her ordeal. To look at her, you'd never know she'd just done something impossible. She was just a baby again, small and vulnerable and utterly ordinary, except for her dreams. In her dreams, she was still standing on that frozen shore, arms spread wide, conducting a symphony of elements. In her dreams, she could still hear Frost's frightened cries transform into songs of gratitude. And in her dreams, the mother bear's eyes held secrets that only she could understand. Secrets about the connections between all living things, about the power of innocence to bridge the unbridgeable. The truck rumbled through the streets of Whiteridge, carrying its precious cargo to safety. Behind it, the village slowly returned to life, people emerging from their homes to check on neighbors and share what they'd seen. The storm was passing, but the story was just beginning. In her mother's arms in the back seat, Nora smiled in her sleep, her tiny hand opening and closing as if still reaching for something, or someone that only she could see. And somewhere in the white wilderness beyond the village, a mother bear and her cub made their way to safety, the cub's fur already drying in the wind. Every few steps the cub would pause and look back, as if searching for something, or someone, already fading into memory but never to be forgotten. The impossible had happened in Whiteridge. And though life would seemingly return to normal, though routines would resume and storms would come and go, nothing would ever be quite the same. For in that terrible blizzard, witnessed by a dozen souls who would swear to its truth, a baby had spoken to the storm, and the storm had listened. A child had reached across the void between species and found not emptiness, but connection. The questions would come later, from doctors and scientists, from reporters who would eventually hear whispers of the story, from those who desperately sought rational explanations for the unexplainable. But for now, in this moment between crisis and calm, there was only wonder. And in that wonder, perhaps, lay the first hint of a greater truth, that the world held more mysteries than anyone had dared to imagine, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the smallest among us could change everything. The medical center in Whiteridge was small, just 3 examination rooms and a single doctor who served the entire village. Dr. Patricia Chen had seen everything in her 15 years here: frostbite, hunting accidents, difficult births in the middle of blizzards, but she had never seen anything like what walked through her door that night. Her temperature is perfect, Dr. Chen said, pulling the thermometer from Nora's ear. Blood pressure normal. No signs of hypothermia, no frostbite. It's as if she never went outside at all. Sophia clutched her daughter tighter. But she was out there for at least 10 minutes, in just her pajamas. You saw them. They were soaked through. Dr. Chen nodded, studying the readings on her instruments. I did. And by all medical logic, she should be hypothermic at the very least. But look at her. She's healthier than most babies who come in for routine checkups. Nora giggled and reached for the stethoscope around the doctor's neck, her movements coordinated in a way that seemed advanced for her age. When Dr. Chen let her hold it, the baby brought it to her mouth. Not to chew on it, as most infants would, but to the earpiece, as if she were trying to listen to something only she could hear. Has she displayed any unusual behaviors before this? Dr. Chen asked carefully. Marcus and Sophia exchanged glances. Not really, Marcus said slowly. She's always been a happy baby. Maybe a little more aware of things than usual, but nothing that seemed impossible, Dr. Chen supplied, because what Robert Wilson described on the phone, what you're telling me now, it should be impossible. A knock on the door interrupted them. Nurse Janet peered in. Doctor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a rather urgent situation. We have another patient. In this storm? Who? Well, you'd better come see for yourself. Dr. Chen frowned, but followed the nurse out, leaving the Reed family alone. Through the door, they could hear muffled voices, then footsteps running down the hall. Do you think she'll report this? Sophia whispered. I don't know. Authorities or scientists or... Report what? Marcus asked gently. That our baby went outside and didn't get cold? That's not exactly a crime. You know that's not all that happened. Before Marcus could respond, Nora began making sounds again, the same melodic humming she'd produced on the shore. The overhead lights flickered once, then twice, before returning to normal. In the hallway, Dr. Chen had stopped short. On a gurney before her lay Tyler Wilson, the boy's face pale and his lips tinged blue. "What happened?" she demanded, immediately going into emergency mode. Robert Wilson stood nearby, his face etched with worry. He collapsed about 10 minutes after we got home. Started shaking, couldn't catch his breath. I thought it was just delayed shock from the bear encounter, but Dr. Chen was already examining the boy, her frown deepening. His core temperature's dropping rapidly, but he's been inside for how long? At least an hour, Robert confirmed. We got him warmed up, gave him hot chocolate, everything. He seemed fine until Tyler's eyes fluttered open. "Cold," he whispered through chattering teeth. "So cold, the water. I can feel the water." "What water?" Dr. Chen asked, checking his pupils. "Tyler, you didn't fall in the water, did you?" No, but I can feel it, like it's inside me. Like when I... His eyes went wide with fear. "The bear. I hurt the bear cub, and now it's in me, the cold." Dr. Chen looked at Robert. "He's delirious. We need to get his temperature up immediately. Janet, warm blankets, heating pads, everything we have." As the medical team worked on Tyler, more footsteps echoed in the hallway. Lily Parker and her mother had arrived, Lily's face streaked with tears. "Is Tyler okay?" she asked in a small voice. "It's my fault. I should have stopped him sooner." Eleanor Parker held her daughter close. "It's not your fault, sweetheart. Tyler made his own choices." But Lily shook her head. "You don't understand. Ever since we left the shore, I've been feeling strange, like something's watching me and my hands." She held them out, and even in the harsh hospital lighting, they seemed to have a faint shimmer to them. "They've been tingling ever since I saw the baby save that cub." Dr. Chen overheard this and stepped out of Tyler's room. "Lily, are you feeling unwell too?" "Not unwell," Lily said carefully. "Just different. Like something woke up inside me when I watched what Nora did. Is that crazy?" Before the doctor could answer, the lights flickered again. This time, they stayed off for several seconds before the backup generator kicked in. And in those seconds of darkness, a sound echoed through the medical center, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "That's her," Lily whispered. "That's the sound the baby was making. Can't you hear it?" The adults exchanged worried glances. They had heard something, but to each of them it had sounded different. To Dr. Chen, it was like medical equipment harmonizing. To Eleanor, it resembled wind chimes. To Robert, still shaken by his son's condition, it sounded like ice cracking. Back in the examination room, Nora had stopped humming. She sat perfectly still in her mother's arms, her head tilted as if listening to something far away. Then, without warning, she began to cry. Not the normal cry of an upset baby, but something deeper, more urgent. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Sophia soothed. But Nora's cries only intensified. Through the door, they could hear commotion in the hallway. "His temperature's still dropping." Dr. Chen's voice was sharp with concern. "This doesn't make any medical sense." Nora's cries grew louder, and with them, the strange humming returned. This time, it wasn't just in the walls. It seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. The medical equipment began to beep erratically. The lights flickered in a rhythm that matched Nora's sobs. "She knows," Sophia said suddenly. "She knows that boy is in trouble." "Sophia, that's not possible?" "Marcus, we just watched our 10-month-old daughter stand up in a blizzard and save a drowning bear cub by controlling the ocean. I think we need to expand our definition of possible." As if responding to her mother's words, Nora reached toward the door, her cries becoming more insistent. Something metallic clattered in the hallway, followed by surprised shouts. The door burst open. Dr. Chen stood there, her usually composed face showing clear distress. "I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. What exactly did your daughter do out there? Because we have a boy dying of hypothermia despite being warm for over an hour, and nothing I'm doing is helping." Before Sophia could answer, Lily Parker pushed past the doctor into the room. The 8-year-old's eyes were bright with an inner light that seemed almost feverish. "She needs to see him," Lily said firmly. "Nora needs to see Tyler. I don't know how I know this, but I do. She can help him." "Lily," her mother called from the hallway. "You can't just— Mom, please, I can feel it. Ever since the shore, it's like there's this connection between all of us who were there. And right now, that connection is telling me that only Nora can fix what's happening to Tyler." Dr. Chen looked between the child and the baby, her medical training warring with what she'd witnessed tonight. "This is highly irregular." "So is a boy dying of hypothermia indoors," Marcus pointed out. "Please, doctor, what do we have to lose?" "After a long moment, doctor." Chen nodded. "Bring her. But if anything seems dangerous—" "We'll stop immediately," Sophia agreed, already standing with Nora in her arms. They filed into Tyler's room, now crowded with concerned faces. The boy lay on the bed, buried under heating blankets, but his skin had taken on an alarming blue tinge. His breathing was shallow, labored. "He keeps talking about water," Robert Wilson said desperately. "About drowning, even though he never went near the water. What's happening to my son?" Nora had gone quiet the moment they entered the room, her large eyes fixed on Tyler with an intensity that seemed impossible for an infant. Slowly, she reached out toward him. "Let her touch him," Lily said urgently. "Please." Sophia looked at Doctor Chen, who nodded reluctantly. She brought Nora closer to the bed, close enough for the baby to place her tiny hand on Tyler's arm. The moment of contact produced an immediate reaction. Tyler's eyes snapped open, pupils dilated. He gasped back, arching off the bed. The medical equipment went haywire, alarms shrieking. "What's happening?" Robert demanded, moving to pull Nora away, but Lily caught his arm. "Wait," she said. "Look." The blue tinge was fading from Tyler's skin. His breathing, though still labored, was deepening. And from the point where Nora's hand touched him, a warmth seemed to be spreading, visible somehow, like sunlight through the water. Nora began to hum again, the same haunting melody from the shore. This time, Tyler's lips moved too, as if he was trying to match the rhythm. The room's temperature seemed to rise several degrees. "His core temperature," Dr. Chen whispered, staring at her monitors. "It's climbing, rapidly. This is—" "Impossible," Marcus finished. "We know, that seems to be tonight's theme." Tyler's eyes found Nora's face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry I hurt your friend. I didn't understand." Nora responded with a sound that was almost like forgiveness, a gentle cooing that made Tyler's tense features relax. She patted his arm once more, then pulled back, settling into her mother's embrace with a satisfied gurgle. The change in Tyler was dramatic. Color flooded back into his cheeks. His breathing normalized. The monitoring equipment showed all vital signs returning to normal ranges, and then exceeding them, showing the peak health of a child who had never been in danger at all. "How?" Dr. Chen breathed. "I think," Lily said quietly, "something happened out there on the shore. Something that changed all of us who saw it. Nora didn't just save that bear cub, she opened something. A door, maybe, between us and something else." Old Samuel Cooper appeared in the doorway, having somehow made his way to the medical center despite the storm. His weathered face was grave but unsurprised. "The elders spoke of this," he said. "Times when the barrier between the human world and the spirit world grows thin. Usually during great storms, when nature's power is at its strongest. They said certain individuals, usually the very young or the very old, could bridge that gap." "You're talking about legends," Dr. Chen protested weakly. "Am I?" Samuel gestured to Tyler, now sitting up in bed, looking healthier than he had in weeks. "You just watched a baby cure hypothermia with a touch. Is that any less legendary than the stories my grandmother told?" Elena Parker spoke up from where she stood with Lily. "There's something else. Lily's been different since we left the shore. She knew things she couldn't have known. Insisted we come here even before we heard Tyler was sick." Lily nodded. "I can feel things now. Not thoughts exactly, but intentions, connections, like invisible threads linking all of us who were there." She looked at Nora. "But they all lead back to her. She's at the center of it." The room fell silent as everyone digested this. Even the skeptical Dr. Chen couldn't deny what she'd witnessed. The baby, who should have frozen to death, had instead controlled the very elements. The boy, who was dying of impossible hypothermia, had been healed by her touch. And now a child spoke of connections and abilities that defied all logic. "What do we do?" Sophia asked finally. "If this is all true, if Nora really has some kind of ability, what do we do?" "We protect her," Samuel said firmly. "The old stories, they also spoke of what happens when the outside world learns of such gifts. Men in dark suits who take the special ones away for study. Families torn apart, villages destroyed." "You're being paranoid," Dr. Chen said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Doctor, you're a woman of science. What would your colleagues do if you published a paper about what you've seen tonight? Would they believe you, or would they demand proof? Demand to study the subject?" Dr. Chen fell silent. They all knew the answer. "So we say nothing," Robert Wilson said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. "We all agree what happened tonight stays in this room." Tyler had a delayed reaction to the cold. Nora never left the house. The bear cub swam to shore on its own. Normal explanations for normal events. "Dad," Tyler spoke up, his voice stronger now. "I felt it, what that baby can do. It's not just healing. When she touched me, I saw things. The bear cub's fear, the storm's purpose, the way everything connects." He looked at Nora with something like awe. "She's not just special, she's necessary for something that's coming." "What's coming?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Tyler shook his head. "I don't know, but it's big. And it's why the storm brought us all together tonight. Why I had to be cruel to the cub. Why Nora had to save it. It's all connected, all part of something larger." Lily nodded eagerly. "I feel it too, like we're all pieces of a puzzle that's just starting to come together." The adults exchanged uneasy glances. It was one thing to accept that something extraordinary had happened. It was another to contemplate that it might be just the beginning. "For now," Eleanor Parker said practically, "we go home. We rest. We process what we've seen, and we keep quiet about it until we understand more." "And if others saw?" Dr. Chen asked. "The other children who were there, their families?" "We talk to them," Robert said, "one by one. Carefully. Make sure everyone understands the importance of discretion." As they prepared to leave, each lost in their own thoughts, Nora had fallen asleep in her mother's arms. But even in sleep, she seemed to glow with an inner light that hadn't been there before. And in the minds of those who had witnessed her miracle, questions multiplied like frost patterns on glass. What had really happened in that storm? What door had been opened? And what would come through it? Outside, the blizzard had finally exhausted itself. The air was still and crisp, stars beginning to peek through the dissipating clouds. But for the people of White Ridge, the calm felt temporary, like the eye of a hurricane that had only just begun to show its power. In her sleep, Nora smiled and murmured something that sounded like the bear cub's name. Somewhere in the wilderness, Frost and his mother denned down for the night, the cub's dreams filled with images of a small human child whose touch had brought him back from the edge of death. And in the space between human and wild, between possible and impossible, something stirred, awakened by a baby's compassion and a storm's fury. The world had shifted just a little, and in that shift lay the seeds of wonders and terrors yet to come. But those were worries for tomorrow. Tonight, families returned to their homes, children were tucked into warm beds, and the village of White Ridge settled into an uneasy peace. The storm had passed. The real tempest was just beginning. 3 days passed in a strange quiet that felt like the world holding its breath. The snow continued to fall, but gently now, covering the evidence of that extraordinary night under pristine white blankets. In the Reed house, life seemed to return to normal. Bottles and diapers, nap times and lullabies. But Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. She watched Nora playing with her stuffed animals, arranging them in careful circles that seemed too deliberate for a baby. Sometimes when Sophia thought her daughter wasn't looking, she'd catch Nora staring at the window with that same intense focus she'd shown at the shore. And at night, when the wind whispered against the walls, Nora would hum that haunting melody in her sleep. Marcus had returned to his job at the village's small power station, but he called home every hour. "Everything okay?" he'd ask, and Sophia would always say yes, even when the lights flickered in rhythm with Nora's breathing, even when the baby's toys moved on their own when she giggled. On the 4th morning, Sophia was feeding Nora breakfast when someone knocked at the door. She opened it to find Lily Parker standing in the snow, her mother Eleanor hovering anxiously behind her. "Mrs. Reed," Lily said formally, though her eyes were bright with that inner light that hadn't faded since the storm. "I need to talk to Nora. It's important." "Lily, sweetheart, Nora's just a baby. She can't really—" "She can," Lily interrupted. "We both know she can. Please. Something's happening, and I think she's the only one who can help." Eleanor stepped forward. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I tried to tell her this could wait, but she insisted. She's been having dreams, visions maybe, about the bears." Sophia hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in, both of you." In the warm kitchen, Lily knelt beside Nora's high chair. The baby stopped playing with her cereal and fixed those knowing eyes on the older girl. "They're in trouble," Lily said quietly. "Frost and his mother. I see them in my dreams. They're trapped somewhere. Lost. And there are others coming, humans. Bad ones." Nora's expression changed, her baby features somehow conveying understanding and concern. She reached out and touched Lily's hand, and for a moment, Sophia could have sworn she saw something pass between them, a flicker of light, or maybe shared knowledge. "Poachers," Eleanor explained to Sophia. "There's been talk in the village. Someone saw the bears during the storm, reported it to authorities. Now, there's a hunting party coming from the mainland. They have permits, claims of a dangerous bear that threatened children." "But that's not what happened," Sophia protested. We saw what we agreed not to talk about," Eleanor reminded her gently. "The official story is that a bear threatened the village children. And now—" Lily stood abruptly. We have to warn them, the bears. They don't know humans are coming for them." "Lily, be reasonable," her mother said. "We can't just go wandering into the wilderness looking for polar bears. It's dangerous and—" She was interrupted by a deep rumble from outside. Through the window, they could see vehicles approaching, not the familiar trucks of Whiteridge, but sleek, dark SUVs with government plates. "They're here," Eleanor whispered. The vehicles pulled up outside the Reed house. Doors opened, and several people emerged. 2 men in expensive winter gear who moved like soldiers. A woman in a sharp business suit incongruous with the Arctic setting, and an older man with a graying beard who looked like he'd spent his life in the wilderness. The woman approached the door and knocked, not the friendly tap of a neighbor, but the authoritative rap of someone who expected to be obeyed. Marcus appeared from the back room, having heard the vehicles. He exchanged a worried glance with Sophia before opening the door. "Good morning," the woman said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Agent Sarah Chen from the Wildlife Management Division. These are my colleagues, Dr. James Harrison, our wildlife specialist, and Officers Bradley and Thompson. We're investigating reports of an aggressive bear incident from a few nights ago." "There was no aggression," Marcus said carefully. "Just a bear cub that got stranded during the storm. No one was hurt." Agent Chen's smile widened slightly. "Nevertheless, we have multiple witness reports of a large adult bear confronting children. That's a serious matter. We'll need to locate and assess the animal." "To kill it, you mean?" Lily said from behind Sophia. Chen turned her attention to the girl. "To ensure public safety. Now, we understand your daughter was present during the incident, Mr. Reed. We'd like to ask her a few questions." "She's 10 months old," Sophia said. "She can't answer questions." "Of course. But our specialist, Dr. Harrison, is trained in reading behavioral cues in witnesses of all ages. It would really help our investigation." Something about the woman's tone set off alarm bells in Sophia's mind. She pulled Nora closer. "I don't think that's necessary." Chen's polite mask slipped slightly. "I'm afraid I must insist. We have legal authority in matters of public safety regarding wildlife." "Then you'll need to come back with a warrant," Marcus said firmly. The 2 officers stepped forward slightly, hands moving to their sides in a subtle but clear threat. The tension in the room ratcheted up several degrees. That's when Nora began to hum. It started low, almost inaudible, but quickly grew stronger. The same melody from the shore, but different now, more urgent, more purposeful. The windows began to rattle in their frames. Dr. Harrison, the older bearded man, suddenly stepped back. "Wait," he said, his voice sharp with recognition. "That sound, I've heard it before." Chen turned to him. "What are you talking about?" 20 years ago, in Alaska, there was a village where strange things happened. Animals behaving oddly, weather patterns that made no sense. And there was a child. His eyes fixed on Nora with a mixture of wonder and fear. A child who could do impossible things. The humming grew louder. Outside, despite the clear morning sky, wind began to pick up. Snow swirled in patterns that defied the breeze's direction. "What happened to that child?" Eleanor asked, though she seemed afraid of the answer. Harrison's face was grim. "She disappeared, along with her whole family. The official report said they died in an avalanche, but—" He shook his head. "The village elders told different stories, said the government took them, and said they wanted to study what the girl could do." Agent Chen's hand moved to her earpiece. "This is Chen. We have a Code 7 situation. Request immediate backup and containment team." "You're not taking my daughter anywhere," Sophia said, her mother's fury overshadowing her fear. "I'm afraid that's not your decision anymore," Chen replied. Dr. Harrison's identification confirms what our satellite surveillance suggested. Your daughter represents a matter of national security." Lily suddenly cried out, her eyes rolling back. When she spoke, her voice was different. Older, deeper, not entirely her own. "The Sela is angry. You seek to cage the wind, to study the storm, but some powers are not meant to be contained." The lights flickered and went out. In the sudden darkness, Nora's humming seemed to fill the entire house. Then, impossibly, the baby spoke. Not in words, but in pure meaning that everyone in the room understood. "Come," the meaning said. "Come now, or all is lost." The front door burst open, though no one had touched it. Beyond, the morning had transformed. The sky swirled with aurora borealis. Impossible at this hour, at this latitude. The snow rose in spirals that formed shapes, almost like writing in a language none of them recognized. And in the distance, two white shapes appeared on the horizon. Bears, moving fast, heading straight for the village. "No," Chen breathed. "It's not possible. Bears don't behave like this." "You have no idea what's possible," Samuel Cooper said from the doorway. The elder had arrived silently, and with him were others, villagers, dozens of them, surrounding the government vehicles. "You think you can come here, take our children, destroy our connection to the land? The spirits won't allow it." Officer Bradley reached for his weapon, but his hand froze mid-motion. Ice had formed around his wrist, seemingly from nowhere, holding him in place. "The child has awakened something," Harrison said, his scientific detachment crumbling into awe. "Something ancient, something that's been sleeping in the ice." The bears were closer now, the massive mother and her cub, moving with impossible speed across the frozen landscape. But they weren't alone. Behind them, the very ground seemed to be changing. Ancient ice was cracking, revealing structures beneath. Not natural formations, but something built, something old. Nora's humming reached a crescendo. In that moment, everyone in the room, villager and outsider alike, saw the same vision. A time before memory, when the ice was young and the world was different. A people who lived in harmony with forces modern humanity had forgotten. Children who could speak to storms, elders who could walk between worlds, and a prophecy that one day, when the world had forgotten its connection to the wild, a bridge would be rebuilt. A child would come who could heal the rift between human and nature, between the physical and the spiritual. But the vision also showed the danger. Forces that would seek to control this power, to weaponize it, to tear the child from her roots and reduce her gift to mere science. The vision faded. Everyone stood stunned, processing what they'd experienced. Agent Chen's earpiece crackled with urgent voices demanding updates, but she didn't respond. She couldn't. Her entire worldview had just shattered. The bears had reached the village edge. They stopped just beyond the houses, waiting. Frost, the cub, looked directly at the Reed house and made a sound. Not quite a roar, more like a call. Nora responded with a giggle that somehow carried the weight of ancient wisdom. She squirmed in her mother's arms, reaching toward the door. "You can't seriously be thinking," Chen started, but Eleanor Parker cut her off. "Look around you," she said. "Look at what's happening. Your guns, your science, your authority. None of it matters here. Something bigger than all of us is at work." Tyler Wilson pushed through the crowd outside. The boy, who'd thrown snowballs at a drowning cub, now stood tall, the strange energy that had touched them all making him seem older than his years. "Let her go to them," he said. "It's what needs to happen. I saw it when she healed me. This is just the beginning." Dr. Harrison moved toward the door, but not threateningly. His eyes were full of wonder now, the scientist in him overwhelmed by the mystic. "In Alaska," he said softly, "the child they took, she tried to tell them. Tried to explain that she was part of something larger. They didn't listen. They put her in a lab, ran tests, tried to isolate the source of her abilities." "What happened?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. "She died," Harrison said simply. "But not before. Not before things started happening, earthquakes, storms that came from nowhere, animals attacking the facility. It was as if nature itself was trying to free her." He looked at Nora. "We can't make the same mistake again." Agent Chen's hand wavered over her weapon. "I have orders." "Your orders don't account for this," Samuel said. He gestured to the transformed landscape, to the bears waiting patiently, to the child whose very presence seemed to bend reality. Some things are bigger than governments and agencies. Some things are sacred. Lily stepped forward, taking Nora's tiny hand. "She needs to go to them. The bears. They're part of this, part of what's awakening. If we try to stop it, to control it." She shuddered. "I see darkness. I see the world growing cold and silent." Sophia looked at her daughter, tears streaming down her face. Every maternal instinct screamed against letting her baby go toward danger, but in Nora's eyes she saw certainty, peace, purpose. "Together," she said finally. "If she goes, we go together." Marcus nodded, taking his wife's hand. "As a family." "We all go," Tyler said. "Everyone who was there that night. We're all connected now, all part of whatever this is." One by one, the others nodded. Lily and her mother. Tyler and his father. Even some who hadn't been at the shore but had felt the change rippling through their community. Agent Chen lowered her hand from her weapon. "Command is going to have my head for this." "Maybe," Harrison said. "Or maybe they'll finally understand that there are things in this world we're not meant to control. Only to witness. To protect." The group moved toward the door. As they stepped outside, the aurora above pulsed brighter. The structures emerging from the ice seemed to sing in harmony with Nora's continued humming. And the bears, mother and cub, waited with infinite patience. As they walked through the village, more people joined them. The elderly who remembered the old stories. Children who felt the pull of something magical. Even skeptics who couldn't deny the evidence of their eyes. Behind them, Agent Chen spoke into her radio. "Stand down. All units stand down. We have a situation beyond our protocols, requesting guidance from the highest levels." But even as she spoke, she found herself following the procession. Dr. Harrison walked beside her, his face transformed by wonder. "You know," he said quietly, "I became a scientist to understand the world, to explain the unexplainable. But maybe some things aren't meant to be explained, only experienced." The procession reached the village edge. The bears stood before them, magnificent and patient. Frost, the cub, approached first. He moved directly to Nora, who laughed and reached out to touch his nose. The moment of contact sent a ripple through everyone present. For an instant, they all felt it. The connection between all living things, the pulse of the planet itself, the dance of predator and prey, human and wild, earth and sky. The mother bear lowered her massive head, allowing Lily to place a trembling hand on her fur. Tyler, overwhelmed by the moment, found tears on his cheeks as he whispered an apology the bear somehow seemed to accept. Then Nora did something that surprised even those who'd witnessed her earlier miracles. She spoke, not in baby babble, not in any language they recognized, but in sounds that carried meaning directly to their hearts. "The bridge is built," her meaning said. The old ways return, but only if we choose, only if we remember, only if we protect what must be protected. In the distance, more shapes appeared on the ice. Not just bears now, but seals emerging from holes, Arctic foxes watching from snowbanks, even a snowy owl circling overhead. The natural world was gathering, called by something ancient and renewed. Harrison pulled out his phone, began recording everything. Not for his agency, he realized, but for posterity, for proof that miracles still existed in a world that had forgotten how to see them. "What happens now?" Agent Chen asked, her authoritative mask completely fallen away. Samuel smiled. Now we learn. We remember. We become what we were always meant to be. Not masters of nature, but part of it." The structures in the ice pulsed with light. Nora laughed, a sound of pure joy that made the aurora dance brighter. And somewhere deep in the Arctic, other stirrings began, other children touched by the same power, other communities remembering old wisdom, other bridges being built between worlds too long separated. The storm had indeed passed, but what it had awakened would reshape everything. And at the center of it all, a 10-month-old baby sat in the snow between human and bear, giggling as she played with powers that governments would kill to control, but could never truly own. Because some things, the most important things, belonged not to any one person or nation, but to the world itself. The real journey was just beginning. As the villagers stood in that sacred moment between the human world and the wild, Nora raised her tiny arms toward the dancing aurora. The lights responded, spiraling down like ribbons of color until they touched the ground around them, forming a circle of brilliant luminescence that encompassed humans and animals alike. Agent Chen's radio crackled one last time. A voice, stern and demanding, ordered immediate action. She looked at the device in her hand, then at the miracle unfolding before her. With deliberate calm, she removed the earpiece and let it fall into the snow. "Some reports," she said quietly to Dr. Harrison, "are better left unfiled." He nodded, understanding passing between them. They weren't agents anymore. They were witnesses to something that transcended all human authority. The mother bear approached Sophia and Marcus. For a moment that stretched like eternity, the massive predator and the human parents regarded each other. Then, in a gesture that would be painted on cave walls and remembered in stories for generations, the bear gently touched her great head to baby Nora, a blessing and a promise combined. Nora's laughter rang out, pure and bright, and with it came change. The ancient structures in the ice began to glow more intensely, but instead of emerging fully, they seemed to sink back, as if their revelation had been only a warning, a reminder of what once was and what could be again. The message was clear. The old powers would sleep until humanity was ready, truly ready, to share the world rather than dominate it. Tyler stepped forward, his young face solemn with new understanding. "I promise," he said to the bears, to Nora, to the listening universe itself. "I'll never forget what cruelty costs. I'll protect what needs protecting." One by one, others made their own vows. Lily promised to nurture her gift, to use her connection to help, never to harm. The villagers pledged to keep the secret, to be guardians of this miracle. Even the government agents, transformed by what they'd witnessed, swore to bury their reports, to redirect their superiors, to protect rather than exploit. As the aurora began to fade back to the heavens, Frost the cub made one last playful bound toward Nora. The two babies, one human, one bear, touched noses in a gesture that sealed something ancient and began something new. Then the bears turned and walked back toward the wilderness, but not with the air of leaving. Rather, they moved like neighbors returning home after a visit, knowing the door between their worlds would always remain open. The gathered animals, the seals, the foxes, the circling owl, began to disperse as well, but slowly, almost reluctantly. As each creature left, it paused to look back at Nora, acknowledging the bridge she had become. Dr. Harrison approached the Reed family. "I have connections," he said softly. "Scientists who understand that not everything needs to be studied, dissected, published. If you ever need help, protection, guidance, we'll be here." Sarah Chen added, "The official report will mention a false alarm, mass hysteria brought on by the storm, no unusual wildlife behavior, no exceptional children. Nothing to see here." Marcus gripped her hand in gratitude, while Sophia hugged Nora closer, tears of relief streaming down her face. As the crowd began to disperse, Samuel Cooper remained, his ancient eyes twinkling with satisfaction. "The spirits are pleased," he told the Reed family. "The balance holds for now. Your daughter, she's not the only one, you know. Around the world, others are awakening. The earth is calling her children home." "What does that mean for Nora?" Sophia asked, fear and wonder mixing in her voice. "It means she'll never be alone," Samuel smiled. "It means she has a purpose greater than any of us can imagine. And it means that someday, when the world is ready, she and others like her will teach humanity how to listen again. To the wind, to the water, to the wisdom we've forgotten." Lily tugged on her mother's coat. "Can I come play with Nora tomorrow?" Eleanor looked at Sophia, who nodded with a smile. "Of course, sweetheart. I think our families are meant to be close now." As they walked back to the village, Nora had fallen asleep in her mother's arms, exhausted by the magnitude of what she'd done. But even in sleep she smiled, and occasionally her tiny fingers would move as if conducting an invisible orchestra of elements. The storm clouds had completely cleared now, revealing a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The sun reflected off the snow with painful brilliance, and for the first time in days, Whiteridge looked like what it was. A small Arctic village where nothing extraordinary ever happened. Except, now, they all knew better. They knew that beneath the ordinary surface, magic flowed. They knew that in the laughter of a child, the world could be remade. They knew that connections once broken could be restored, and that humanity's long loneliness in the universe was, perhaps, self-imposed. That night, as the Reed family sat by their fire, Nora safe in her crib, Marcus asked, "Do you think we did the right thing? Letting her go to them?" Sophia watched their daughter sleep, noting the faint glow that still seemed to surround her. I think right and wrong are too small for what happened today. We were part of something bigger, something necessary." Through the baby monitor they heard Nora stirring, humming that haunting melody in her sleep. Outside their window, impossibly, they heard an answer. The distant howl of a wolf, the cry of an owl, the whisper of wind that sounded almost like singing. Miles away, in a den carved from ancient ice, a mother bear curled around her cub. Frost dreamed of the little human who had saved him, who had shown him that the world held more kindness than cruelty, more connection than separation. In his dreams he saw the future, a world where the boundaries between species blurred, where the old wisdom returned, where children like Nora would lead humanity back to its place in the great web of life. And in a government office thousands of miles south, Agent Sarah Chen sat at her desk, staring at a blank report form. After a long moment, she typed, "Investigation concluded. No anomalous activity found. Recommend closing file." She hesitated, then added one more line. "Some things are meant to remain mysteries." As she hit send, she could have sworn she heard, just for a moment, the sound of a baby's laughter carried on an impossible Arctic wind. She smiled, closed her laptop, and knew with certainty that she had finally found something worth protecting in a career built on exposing secrets. The bridge between worlds stood strong, guarded not by force but by love, not by secrecy but by sacred trust. And at its heart, a 10-month-old baby slept peacefully, dreaming of bears and storms, of ancient songs and future harmonies, of a world where miracles weren't just possible, but necessary. In Whiteridge, the aurora danced one more time that night, not in the sky where it belonged, but reflected in the eyes of every person who had witnessed the impossible and chosen to believe. The storm had brought them more than snow and wind. It had brought them remembering. It had brought them hope. And in the form of one special child, it had brought them a promise. The world was waking up. The bridge was built. The dance between human and wild would begin again. And somewhere in the Arctic night a bear cub named Frost lifted his head and sang, actually sang. A song taught to him by a human baby who spoke the language of the universe itself. The ending was really just the beginning of everything.